Hi, Jenny. Thanks for coming. I I need a friend right now. It's okay, Mom. The exams are still in a month. How are things at the university? I haven't seen or spoken to you in months. You know how it is, Mom. My last year at the university, and I'm working hard to get into the top 10%. There are wolfish laws in this world, especially in law. But I thought you were going to work for your father? Yes, actually I have already started, but I want him to be able to say that he hired me because I was one of the best students, and not just because I am his daughter. As for me, I will work for him not because he is my father, but because his law firm is the best in these parts. I know I won't get much treatment from him. On the contrary, I expect to be given the shittiest job, something equivalent to cleaning a pigsty for lawyers only. There was silence between the two women before the older one broke it with a snort. Still, would it kill you to call once a week? Jenny looked at her mother for a long time before answering. Maybe, but, well, we've never been, like, close, Mom. Have we? Be honest. No, Margaret sighed. You've always been Daddy's daughter. Jenny flinched at her mother's soft accusatory tone. Don't you dare try to blame the lack of intimacy on me, Mom. If I'm Daddy's daughter, it's because you are. Jenny paused, searching for a suitable term, emotionally absent from my life for almost the entire time that I can remember. The older woman lowered her eyes when she realized a little of the truth in her daughter's well-chosen words, but it was simply not in Margaret's nature to admit guilt. I've been working too, damn it, you know? I was the chairman of the parents' committee while you were in school. I have led and still lead several charities. I have the same successful career as your father. Just because I don't make a lot of money doesn't mean that my career isn't important. She sat down, knowing that anger and digging up old problems would not help her achieve her goals. Jenny did not feel such limitations. You didn't have to do any of this, Mom. Whatever the good reasons, you chose it yourself. And let's face it, you did it more for your own self-aggrandizement than to do something good for others. You were supposed to be in charge of everything, remember? You left the parent committee when someone else was elected chairman. If you were honest with yourself, you would know that you have retained the chairmanship of most of the charities you run only because Dad or his partners donate most of the money they have at their disposal. Now it was Jenny's turn to realize that there was no point in stirring up old coals, saying what she really wanted to say. That she would rather have her mother by her side instead of all this. What was the point of telling her mother that she had spent most of her childhood feeling like just another unpleasant detail that her mother had to organize? She had never listened before. Telling the bitter truth might have been pointless, but she couldn't stand by and listen to her father being criticized. I'm sorry, Mom, but it's true. It was my dad who went to all the sports classes with me after school. It was Dad I could talk to when I needed a shoulder to lean on. Dad, who helped with my homework and taught me how to ride a bike, drive a car. It was Dad in everything. You just weren't there, either physically or emotionally. You were, how can I describe it? Detached. Inaccessible. No, it's not fair, Jenny. I'm warm. Ask anyone. It's your father who's so cold, completely unfeeling. That's bullshit, Mom. Dad is a lawyer, and they, just like doctors and psychiatrists, cannot afford to get emotionally involved with their clients. It would destroy them. He still has all the feelings that a well-adjusted person has, but he has to control them, hide them. You must learn to separate emotions and actions in the early stages of learning. So sometimes it was difficult for him to switch when he came home. To me, it just proves that he's human. You, well, I'm starting to think you're a sociopath. The elderly woman blushed deeply. A sociopath? How dare Jenny? For God's sake, she was doing charity work. Charities that helped people. She was a humanitarian. With difficulty, Margaret managed to cope with her angry reflex. Right now she needed a friend, and after her husband's actions last week, there were very few of them. Being a person extremely prone to competition, Margaret did not possess the personal qualities that would allow her to make many close friends, rather acquaintances competitors. Her closest confidant was her sister, who called her and told her about the photos and videos that Dave had shown her. Pictures of her dirty dancing in a club. Then the camera follows her and a guy 20 years younger than her to the door of a motel room. No, it didn't prove that she was having extramarital lovemaking, but it was obvious that this was what was going to happen. Her sister ranted about her disgusting behavior until Margaret couldn't stand it and hung up the phone. No, being justifiably angry right now would be very counterproductive. There was silence for several long seconds before Jenny broke the awkward silence. So, what did you want to talk about, Mom? I have to say, you look like shit. Your father left me, Jan. I know, Mom. He told me. There was another long, drawn-out pause. He also told me why, Mom. The older woman's gaze dropped to the table and stayed there. Even though she felt like she was being perceived by others, she desperately hoped that Dave hadn't told the rest of the family about it. It was enough that he showed the video to her sister. Margaret felt stumped. How much had Dave revealed to their daughter? Not knowing how much Jennifer knew made voluntary admission somewhat problematic. For her part, Jennifer expected her mother to be honest and open with her for the first time in her life. She was disappointed. Again, Jennifer sighed. When she spoke, her voice was neutral, calm, and her legal training was telling. I'll tell you what Dad told me. He found out that you were cheating on him and framed you. He pretended to have gone on a business trip for 3 days and 2 nights. Instead, he was hanging around the city and watching you. He thought that you would at least wait until the second night, but he said that you left before the plane he was supposed to fly on was served. He followed you to that club across town and saw you taking drinks from a third guy who came up to you. What was wrong with the first two, Mom? Too old in their 30s? Her mother didn't take the bait. She kept looking down. He watched the guy buy you drinks and your dirty dancing act. He followed you to a nearby motel, watched you check in, saw you heading to your room. How did you feel when Dad patted you on the shoulder while you were kissing a guy outside the room? Dad told me he wanted to take off your wedding and engagement rings, but they weren't there, Jenny snorted. What do you think, Mom? Did you take off your rings and become unmarried again? Oh my God, her mother thought. This is so embarrassing. Indeed, this moment was the worst in her hidden life. To tear herself away from a kiss that was supposed to be the prelude to a night of pleasure, to look into the unflappable eyes of her husband, with whom she had lived for 28 years. She could still hear his slightly strangled voice, saying with unwavering determination, "Goodbye, Margaret." His words, that voice, they made her numb and numb until Dave disappeared. It was only when Dave was out of sight that instinct kicked in, the awkward high-heeled run to her car, and the screeching tires on the way home. The policeman who stopped her, the alcohol test, and the subsequent trip to the police station for registration simply recorded the loss of her reputation and the loss of leadership positions in addition to the dissolution of her marriage. By the time the taxi took her home, Dave had been gone for a long time. Losing everything that was important to her made maintaining her relationship with her only child even more important. How could she turn this to her advantage? Even she was smart enough to realize that the excuse, "I was lonely, I let myself be seduced, this has never happened before," was inappropriate. She has been a lawyer's wife for 28 years. She didn't need someone from the outside to tell her that a married woman who entered the club alone, without rings, had proved her intention. What did Jenny say? Dave found out that she was cheating. How? She was always very careful. How did your father find out? Her daughter sighed, disappointed that what was bothering her mother right now was the way her cheating had been discovered. Perhaps foolishly, she hoped for some remorse for her actions on the part of the woman who gave birth to her. Do you remember that 2-day trip that Dad took about a month ago? He came home and went to the toilet in the bathroom. Under the toilet seat, where only the guy will see, someone has pasted a note. The note said he picked up what he thought was a single woman well. She wasn't wearing rings and escorted her to her house for a fun night out. In the morning, he realized that there was obviously also a man living in the room, probably a husband. He felt ashamed. He left a note where the woman would never have found it if she hadn't cleaned the toilet, and ran away before the woman woke up. To be honest, this note gives me peace of mind as a woman. It's nice to know that there are still decent people in the world. Margaret rarely swore, but the B word was the only one suitable for her current situation. You know, mother. Jennifer's use of the word mother instead of mom made Margaret shudder in anticipation of what was to follow. I can't help but think that you've been doing this for years. I remember from about the time I was 6, every time Dad left town on business, you sent me to Grandma's. Have you really been cheating on Dad for so long? You call him an insensitive bastard. but he must have really loved you if he didn't notice it all these years. Only love can make someone so blind. Margaret's gaze was fixed on the floor and stayed there, her inability to deny anything deafening. How could she fix this situation? None of the family and friends she and Dave had returned her calls. She was called to 2 urgent meetings at the organizations where she worked as a volunteer later this week. It's not hard to guess what all this means. Then there was the prenuptial agreement that she and Dave signed, devastating the partner who cheated. Of course, she wouldn't be completely destitute, but her comfortable existence would be a thing of the past. The certified letter with the notification of eviction from the house arrived only today. She needed a friend. She needed support, now more than ever before. Various plans of attack, words of justification flashed through her mind. None stood up to even the most cursory scrutiny. But he had to be. After all, Jennifer was her own flesh and blood. Was it really so terrible to want them to stay cocky for as long as possible? Besides, she was holding the bottle most of the time. Wait, if I tell her. Mother, you've been served. With a neutral expression on her face, Jennifer Brown stood up, calmly unbuttoned her jacket, and pulled out a manila envelope. For a split second, Margaret wondered how she could have missed the extra volume on her daughter's usually slender figure. Jennifer was in no hurry. Her movements were slow and unhurried. She was looking at her mother all the time. She put the folder on the table in front of her mother. Jennifer's movements accelerated, as if she was afraid to miss the moment. She pulled her phone out of her purse and quickly took a picture of the shocked woman opposite. Then she went out.